Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on the fuel system for the van. Obviously we need to get electric fuel pump in the tank of that van, and I wasn't sure how to do it until I ran across this company called Tanks Incorporated. Now this is not sponsored, I just found this on the internet, and it rang a bell because I have a tin in the house that says Tanks that I bought at a place called Yogi's in Monticello, Iowa. Turns out, same place. So I ran right out there in the car, half hour away, talked to the guys out there, and they hooked me up with the Tanks PA4 universal fuel pump kit. Pretty straightforward. Basically, we're going to cut a hole in the top of this tank. We're going to insert this down into the tank, and obviously we're going to have a nice gasket. And then from there, we just pre-assemble this. Obviously, we cut it to whatever height we need, and that's going to give us our in-tank fuel pump capable of supporting 500 horsepower plus, so they say. There are going to be some modifications on the way. I'm going to have to make some changes, just like we do to everything. But anyways, we're going to get started. So it's pretty straightforward from my understanding. I've never put one in, but I did watch a YouTube video on it just to be sure. This is the only spot. I wanted to put it back here in this corner, but there's just not enough surface area. And technically there's not really enough surface area here, but we're going to have to make some. So we are going to trace the outline of this guy inside, and I'm also going to mark all the holes. So now that we have our holes marked, everything's ready to go. Let me just say that yes, this is the original fuel tank. I did plan on getting a new one. I cannot find this exact model. They show a different model for this application. So I drained this thing well over a week ago, flushed with water. I had a fan running through here, pushing air out there for the last 4 hours. It smells very clean inside, not gassy, and it shouldn't blow up. But just to make sure, I'm not going to do anything that creates sparks. So I'm going to do an old HVAC trick that we used to do back in the day. Flat screwdriver, nice hammer. Put a nice hole in it. Yeah, I know you could make a spark. I'm not saying this is the way to do it. I'm saying this is the way I'm doing it. So now that we have our hole cut basically ready to go, I need to technically drill all these holes for the screws that are going to fasten the two together. But again, I don't really want to put a bunch of metal into this tank, so I'm going to use my old punch, and you can get these right at Harbor Freight. They're nothing special. Now we just got to kind of bend it up a little bit, just get a little flatter. Moving on. I know, it's a gas tank, but it's really clean. It doesn't even smell like gas. I'm not worried about it. Anyways, I think we're ready to put that in and basically give it a test run, but first we need to set up the height. From the bottom of the tank to the top of the tank, which I got 10 1/4 and 10. So I'd say we're going to go with 10 inches. So now we'll just mark 10 inches from the bottom of the flange. Now they want the tray to be facing left or right of the tank. Instead of acceleration, they're more or less concerned with cornering. So it's going to face something like that. This is a stainless steel bolt and nut. So that there. And we are going to be taking it back apart again, I believe, so we're not going to get crazy with tightening it, but we are going to test fit it quick. Really good. So now we're basically going to set up the fuel pump as far as the depth, so we can cut our hoses to fit, so we have a pump. We are going to install the foam sleeve and the filter. That seems like it's going to be a tight fit, doesn't it? We're going to need a little lube on that of some sort. Much better. And this is, I believe, a Walbro pump. That's what they use in all of their setups, I guess. So now we have our supply line and the return line. We skipped a step. Man. So now we are going to install basically the supply and return 90s. And these are NPT thread, pipe thread. So it does say to wrap them with thread tape. And then give them a light coating of gasket maker or black silicone, whatever you want to use, as long as it's fuel resistant. For lubrication is what it says. There we go, very well lubricated as requested. So you have a return line, supply line, and the vent. And I thought this tank was vented, but it's not. So I actually have to go back out there and get a rollover vent. But I'm going back out there next week anyways to get the rest of the fuel system. So not sure what happened there, but my headphones shut off. So, or my microphone shut off. So I had to fix that. Anyways, tighten them up. That one's good. It looks like we got plenty of room to go long, so kind of complicated to get in that already. Let's go 5. Actually 5 will be fine right from there. Now we're going to measure our return line, which is the white hard plastic line, and that needs to be 1 inch from the bottom of the tray. So it's at 10 inches. We're going to cut it at 9. That'll give it 1 inch above the tray. Now we're going to remove the tray from the support arm and turn it upside down and place it across the tray. Look at that. That way the fittings don't sit on the table. Those are some good directions there, you know? Okay. Pretty straightforward. Install the first hose clamp. Install the second hose clamp over there for later. And now we are going to install this. Now this doesn't look like it's clamped on. It looks like it is just press fit. And they say to heat it up with a heat gun. That was a good thought. Worked nice. We're going to install the fuel pump. Now we are going to route the wires through these little jam nuts, leaving a little slack so the wire does not chafe according to the directions. And now the directions say to tighten it with a 9mm wrench. I don't think I've ever used a 9mm wrench. I don't even know if I own a 9mm wrench. 3 toolboxes later, I found either a 6mm or a 9mm, but looks to be a 9. Anyways, So now we're going to tighten up these jam nuts that are going to seal these wires up, and they say to tighten them in quarter turn increments until the wire does not slide up and down anymore. It still slides. Go another quarter turn. Does not slide. Okay, that's cool. I like that. So now we are going to attach the tray to the other thingamadoohickey here, which is going to be approved. I think this should have been done before the pump was done, but it didn't say so in the directions, so we're going with it. So the next step is we're going to install this little bracket thing behind the fuel pump, and this basically this is going to strap to the fuel pump. So we're going to put a bolt, supplied bolt through there, through the slot back here. Now we're going to take this big old zip tie here, and we are going to thread it. Now we are going to take the smaller, and we are going to strap the return line to the pump. Like so. That is a tight fit. I know. I know what you're saying. I wasn't going to weld it in, but after reading the directions on how to put it in without welding it in, my theory is if this fuel pump goes out in, I don't know, Colorado, it's going to be real bare to pull that pump out in a parking lot of a hotel. And don't think I haven't done it already, because I've already done that already. So by welding that ring in, basically you got to get under there and put it in and put screws in with silicone, and it's just going to be a mess. This tank is thoroughly flush, thoroughly vented. It is not going to blow up, but still I do not recommend you doing this. This is up to you. Now, did I mention I do not recommend that? Get sealant, and we are going to insert for the final time for a never to be seen again, hopefully. And it's a tight fit, but it fits. And just like that, we have an electric fuel pump to run our Coyote. Now we just got to figure out the sending unit, but you don't need to watch that. I need to modify the sending unit. Well, it's Sunday morning, guys, and as you can see, where's the door? Look at that. Door is open. It's nice out. It's like 65. Anyways, we're going to wrap up this fuel tank, and then I'm going to show you what we're doing on the gauge cluster quick, and then we're going to jump into a whole new project. So anyways, I left off last night, new fuel systems in, and I was working on this. I didn't do any recording because I really didn't know what I was doing, but the fuel sending unit's supposed to go, it's supposed to go in like this, and obviously it's going to hit all that pickup now. So I changed the settings in here, the notches, and so basically I'm just going to, and I did a little reconfiguring on this also. Bent that rod a little bit better position. So anyways, instead of this going in like this, we're just going to turn it sideways now. And Fasten that in there somehow. There we go. But before I do that, I need to measure the resistance of full and empty because I have to program this dash, and I'm assuming it's going to ask me for the resistance, so let's do that before we put it together. So the quick ohm resistance setting here, we'll just check across these two terminals. And right now it's empty because it's all the way down. We got 70.3, so 70 ohms empty. So make sure the rad's all the way up. 14.0, so 14 ohms full. But what I would like to know, I don't want to set it to completely empty. I'd rather show empty before it's actually empty. So I'm just going to do some quick. So it's at like 76 right there. Empty. So if that goes up just a little. I'm going to say let's set it to 60 ohm empty. Put a question mark behind it so I remember what I'm thinking. We'll set it to 60 ohms empty. That way I know there's a good amount of fuel in there and I don't want to starve that pump. So I'd rather think I'm out of gas than actually be out of gas. So I'm going to set this in. I did have to cut off the pickup tube because it was in the way of the new unit. So I cut it off, crimped it shut. So it can't really draw any fuel. Plus I'm going to put a cap on the other side of it too once it's all done. So we don't have to worry about any issues with that. Alright, so that part's done. Ready to go back in the truck. The only thing left to do is clean up the mess. But, hey, that's what Mondays are for. I don't like working on Mondays. I like cleaning up on Mondays. Anyways, let me show you what we're doing with the dash cluster quick. And I'm not going to lie, it's kind of cobbling. But I don't really have any other options right at this point. So, okay, so as I was saying earlier, the factory one bolted in to these two locations, and this one, and this one. And right now, these are the only two that aren't broke. That one's broke, and that one's broke. This thing's just brittle. And obviously I'm trying to put this dash cluster in it. So what we did is, the only thing I can come up with really, got some 10-quarter bolts, 3 inches long. I got them double nutted onto the cluster. And the plan is to simply pour some epoxy down in there over the bolt heads on all 4 corners and just leave it sit. And then tomorrow, take these nuts off, be able to pick this up off there, and I'll probably end up adding some epoxy to the situation after that. But this stuff, we're using a 3M 08115. This is the same stuff I use to put box sides on trucks, so it's not going to fall off once we get it on there, I'll tell you that. I did take hot glue and pre-filled these crevices basically, because this stuff doesn't like to pool up. It likes to flow. So basically made a dam to kind of hold it in a puddle. And up here, we're not going to get much on here in the original run, but if I can just get the bolts enough to stick, then after I take the cluster off, then I can build up around it. So that's the only thing I can come up with, and this is what I'm going to call cobbling. I mean, it's not the correct way that I want to do it. I want to build brackets to adapt this piece to that piece, you know. And if I had a 3D printer, that'd be really cool. That would be a reason to buy a 3D printer, wouldn't it? But again, with those 3 being broke, I have nowhere to fasten it anymore. So, I think this stuff's like 80 bucks now. That's what I heard. I haven't bought it lately. I know when I bought that was 50 bucks for that tube. So, it might be cobbling, but it's not the cheapest way to do it. I probably could just hot glued it in there, I'm sure. This is probably way too much, but actually I have another project too that I need to fix while I have panel bond mixed up, so I'm also mixing up some for that. And you're supposed to use a straw on the end of the gun, I get it, but you gotta throw it away every time. For this step, this works just fine. I wouldn't do it this way if I was putting a box side or something on. Then I use the straws, but for doing these kind of repairs. This is way good now, so. I did grind all the chrome, plastic chrome off of the area. And we're just going to put a nice little puddle on there. But I don't want to get it all over. I got tape. I don't know if you've seen the tape on the gauge cluster. I don't want to get it all over the place either. Now we're just going to put, so I got the Phillips head screws, that way it has something to go down into and bite onto basically. And I did take some 50 grit to it and rough the end of the bolt heads up. And like I said, tomorrow after it's dry, then I can put another layer on and go up and catch the threads of the bolt. And it's not going to go anywhere. Now I just need to set it down in the goop and stir it up. Okay guys, now that the fuel tank is done, the cluster is started, I'm going to say. I'm down to 2 problems. Tranny cooler lines, which I thought were going to be easy, but that's proven wrong. And shifter linkage. And obviously I'm trying to keep the stock shifter in the van, the column shifter. And this 6R80 is obviously set up for cable shift. So I'm going to start by cutting this off. This is off the C6 transmission from the old setup. I'm not going to try. I'm going to put this in there for starters, and then from there we are just going to cut some stuff up, because again, I don't know exactly how this is going to end up, but the only way to get there, I say, it's got to get worse before it can get better. It's going to get worse. Well, I didn't plan on that hole being that big, but it is. It's too big for this. Too much slop. So the only thing I can think of is to weld it shut, grind it down, smooth it out, and re-drill it. It's the only option I got, right? Anyways, let's let that cool off for a little bit. And then, so we're going to try to run the original rod that's coming off of the shifter, and there's a header in the way. Like really in the way. So I got like 3 different ways I can do this. I'm going to start with this one. If that don't work, I got another idea. If that don't work, then we're just going to order a cable setup that switches it over to cable, but I don't really want that. Alright guys, we got that all ground down, and put in the drill press, drilled a hole through it obviously. So this is the factory shift mechanism off of the C6, and it bolts to obviously this little slide mechanism here. So it's got that little spline on it type thing, so it locks in and bolts down tight, but can still swivel. So that's pretty important evidently. So that is now incorporated into the 6R80 transmission, because this is the 6R80 transmission linkage with the C6 adapter. So we're using the C6 shift rod off of the van, and it actually was going to line up really good. It was, when I first put the motor in that thing and just kind of had it sitting there, the only thing that lined up out of all that was the shifter linkage. It was like within like probably an inch of going right on the transmission. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then I went and put some long tube headers on it, and well, now it's not so cool. So we had to make some modifications here, obviously. So what I did is I cut the factory rod, which is these two. This was just welded straight on here. And I spent probably 2 hours underneath there trying to get this lined up. And this is just a temporary piece of 3/8 rod tacked together, and this is the position that I need it to be in when it's on the truck. So now that that is set up, I am going to take So this is 3/8 rod, this is 1/2 inch rod. The factory used 7/16, but I can't get 7/16 rods from Menards. So 1/2 inch it is. It ain't gonna hurt to be a little stronger. Bigger is better, right? So I'm going to do some heating and some bending, and basically I just need to connect this to this following this shape and make it look like something in the end. But we did tack this together and put it on the truck and ran it. I had Cameron inside running the gears, and I was downstairs. I was underneath the van watching the linkage, the shift linkage, and everything worked. Park, reverse, neutral, drive was all within range, and I can adjust that. But you also have to remember that the 6R80 transmission has park, reverse, neutral, drive, second, first, and manual. Obviously, the 77 doesn't have a manual on the bottom of it. So what's cool is Ford kind of thought about that. Basically, when I hit second and first, the shifter goes between 2 and 1. So it adds, the third gear is there. It's just the indicator is kind of jacked up. But as long as I know how it works, that's all that really matters. So, and that's only if you need to get down to manual mode, if I'm going to be drag racing that old lady from the stoplight, you know, from the grocery store, because I will. But that's the only time we need manual mode is when I'm screwing around. So as long as I know what it does, that's all it's important. So we're going to fire the torch up and heat some stuff up. I'm going to set this thing up. I'm going to turn the tunes back on because it's going to take a while. And then I'm going to add music over top of it all because you can't listen to what I'm listening to. So here we go. Well, we got her all welded up and ground down and back installed for now anyways. It's just a temporary, but it's hooked up. I do have it, so I set it into D for drive, obviously, and then I lock it onto the shifter. So from park, so it gets a little tricky, but you got reverse, neutral's pretty nice, drive's fine, but that's where it gets funky. So drive is now you're gonna go to what they call sport mode in the Mustang. In my truck, it's called manual, which is between drive and second. And then technically you have second gear again, and then first gear. And I still got this much linkage left, so first, second, sport, drive, neutral, reverse, park. That is absolutely as good as it's ever going to get, and I think it's way good enough for this old girl. So anyways, that's about it for this week. Next week we got the fuel lines to run. It's windy outside. Next week we got the fuel lines to run, and then start to work on the HVAC lines, which are not going good whatsoever. So I'm not sure what I'm doing there yet, but I got to figure it out. But other than that, wrap up those couple things, and I think the motor's ready to come out, and we'll start getting the motor ready for paint, get the inside painted. I do have valve covers coming for it tomorrow. Paintable valve covers are supposed to be here tomorrow. I need to get the intake ordered, and I need to get the wiring ordered for next week so I can get working on the wiring and hopefully have the motor back in this thing by the end of the month. So anyways, that's it for this week. It's supposed to be some strong storms. It's Friday night, and we're supposed to obviously get that windstorm and all that good stuff. It's on its way. We got a couple hours yet, so we're gonna run the dog to the park, and then tomorrow we'll get back on the van and continue on. So we'll catch you on the next one, guys. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.